The silence in the royal palace was wrong. Captain Jake Morrison knew this the moment he stepped through the massive crystal doors. He had visited many alien worlds during his 15 years of service, but he had never heard a palace this quiet. The Zephyrian homeworld of Velthar stretched out below them through the tall windows. What should have been a bustling capital city looked empty. The great crystal towers that once glowed with power now stood dark against the purple sky. No ships moved between the buildings. No lights flickered in the windows. "Sir, are you sure we should be here?" asked Lieutenant Lisa Brooks, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. She walked beside him, her scanner beeping softly as it checked the air for dangers. The orders were pretty clear about staying away from Zephyrian space. Jake nodded but kept walking. The message they had received 3 days ago still played in his mind. It was broken and hard to understand, but the fear in the alien voice was clear. Someone was dying here. Someone needed help. The message mentioned cubs, Jake said. Young ones in danger. We can't just ignore that. Behind them, the rest of the diplomatic team followed quietly. Sergeant Ben Taylor carried the medical supplies, his eyes moving constantly as he watched for threats. Dr. Karen White stayed close to Lisa, her medical scanner ready. The others spread out in a protective formation, just as they had trained. The palace halls were beautiful but empty. Golden walls stretched high above their heads, covered in pictures that told stories of great battles. The Zephyrians were famous across the galaxy for being fierce warriors. Their cat-like bodies and sharp claws made them perfect fighters. For hundreds of years, other species had feared them. Now the palace felt like a tomb. They walked deeper into the building, following signs that Lisa's translator converted to human writing. The royal quarters were somewhere ahead. Jake hoped they would find answers there. The distress signal had come from this location. "Captain," Ben called softly. He had stopped beside a large window that looked out over the city. "Look at this." Jake joined him at the window. The view showed the capital city spread out for miles. But something was wrong with the picture. There were no lights anywhere. No movement in the streets. The great factories that should have been working day and night were silent and dark. "It's like everyone just left," Karen whispered. "Or died," Ben added quietly. Lisa checked her scanner again. "I'm reading life signs, but not many. Maybe a few hundred in the whole city. There should be millions." They continued walking through the empty halls. The carpet under their feet was soft and expensive, but it was covered with dust. Nobody had cleaned these floors in weeks, maybe months. Pictures on the walls showed the royal family, tall, proud Zephyrians with golden fur and bright green eyes. The adults looked fierce and strong. The cubs looked playful and happy. Jake wondered if any of them were still alive. They found the first Zephyrian in the throne room. He was huge even for his species, with thick golden fur that had lost its shine. He sat on a crystal throne that seemed too big for even his large frame. His green eyes watched the humans enter, but he did not stand to greet them. "I am Emperor Kethavar," he said in careful human words. His voice was deep and tired. "Why have prey species come to our world?" Jake stepped forward and gave a small bow. He had studied Zephyrian customs during the trip here. "Your Majesty, we received your distress signal. We came to offer help." The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger. "We sent no signal asking for help from humans. The Zephyrian Empire does not beg." "But someone did send a message," Lisa said, checking her records on a small device. "It came from this palace. It mentioned cubs in danger." Something changed in the Emperor's face when Lisa mentioned cubs. For just a moment, the proud mask slipped, and Jake saw real fear in those green eyes. "There are no cubs in danger here," Kethavar said, but his voice was quieter now. "The royal family is strong. We need nothing from prey species." Ben stepped forward. His years as a veterinarian had taught him to read animal body language, and he could see things the others missed. "Your Majesty, with respect, you look sick." "When did you last eat?" The question seemed to hit the Emperor like a physical blow. He gripped the arms of his throne tighter, and Jake could see how thin his hands had become under the fur. "The Zephyrian Empire has faced hard times," Kethavar admitted. "The machine race called the Devourers destroyed our supply worlds. Our food shipments have stopped. But we are strong. We survive." "How long since the last shipment arrived?" Karen asked gently. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. 47 rotations." Jake did quick math in his head. A Zephyrian rotation was about 26 Earth hours. That meant no food for almost 50 days. No wonder the Emperor looked so thin. Your Majesty, Jake said carefully, we have food supplies on our ship. We would be honored to share them with you. The reaction was immediate and violent. Kethvar stood up from his throne, his claws extending as he snarled at the humans. Even weakened by hunger, he was terrifying. Never, he roared. The royal blood of Zephyr does not accept charity from prey. We would rather die with honor than live in shame. The humans stepped back, hands moving toward their weapons. But Jake held up a hand to stop them. He could see the pain behind the Emperor's anger. This was not evil or madness. This was a father trying to protect his pride while his family starved. We understand, Jake said softly. We would not want to cause shame to your family. The Emperor seemed surprised by this response. He had expected the humans to argue or fight. Instead, they showed respect for his position. Slowly, he sat back down on his throne. The cubs, Lisa said suddenly. Where are they now? Again, that flash of fear crossed the Emperor's face. He tried to hide it, but he was too weak and tired to maintain the mask. They are in their quarters, he said. They are strong. They do not need to see prey species in their home. But Jake could hear the lie in his voice. Something was very wrong with the royal cubs. The distress signal had mentioned them specifically. They were the real reason someone had called for help. Your Majesty, Jake said, would you allow our doctor to check on them, just to make sure they are healthy? No, Kethvar snapped. The royal cubs are not to be seen by outsiders. This audience is over. Leave our world now. Jake looked at his team. They all understood the situation. Somewhere in this palace, young Zephyrians were dying of starvation. Their father was too proud to accept help, even if it meant watching his children die. The humans had a choice to make. They could respect the Emperor's wishes and leave knowing they had tried, or they could find another way to help, even if it meant going against direct orders from a planetary ruler. Jake made his decision. We will respect your wishes, Your Majesty, but our ship will remain in orbit for a few days while we repair some systems. If you change your mind about accepting help, you can contact us. The Emperor said nothing, but Jake could see relief in his eyes. The humans were not leaving immediately. There was still hope, even if his pride would not let him ask for it directly. Jake Morrison could not sleep. He lay in his captain's quarters aboard the Aurora's Dawn, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the Emperor's eyes. Behind all that pride and anger, he had seen a father's desperation. Somewhere in that palace, cubs were dying. He got up and walked to the bridge. The night shift was on duty, monitoring the silent planet below. Lieutenant Brooks looked up when he entered. Can't sleep either, Captain, she asked. Keep thinking about those cubs, Jake admitted. The Emperor was lying about them being fine. Ben Taylor looked up from his station. In my experience with animals, parents only get that defensive when their young are in real danger. He's scared, but what can we do? Asked Dr. White. He made it clear we're not welcome. If we force our way in, it could start a war. Jake nodded. She was right, but it didn't make the situation easier to accept. He walked to the main window and looked down at the dark planet. Most of the cities were completely black now. Only a few lights still glowed here and there. Lisa, he said suddenly, can your scanners detect life signs from orbit? Lisa worked at her console for a few minutes. I can get basic readings, but not detailed ones. The palace has some kind of shielding that blocks most scans. What about the city around the palace? More typing on the console. Lisa frowned as she read the results. Captain, this is strange. I'm reading almost no life signs in the entire capital. The population should be in the millions, but I'm only detecting a few thousand people. Where did everyone go? Karen asked. Maybe they left to find food, Ben suggested. If the supply ship stopped coming, people might have moved to areas where they could hunt or find wild plants. Jake considered this. It made sense, but it also meant the situation was worse than they thought. If an entire city had emptied because of starvation, then the royal family was probably in terrible condition. Sir, Lisa said suddenly, I'm getting another signal from the planet. Very weak, but it's coming from the palace. Put it on speakers. The bridge filled with static. Through the noise, they could hear a voice. It was much younger than the Emperor's voice, and it sounded scared. Please, the voice whispered. If anyone can hear this, the cubs are dying. Father won't let us ask for help, but Kirova hasn't moved in 2 days, please. The signal cut off. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Ben spoke quietly. That sounded like one of the older cubs. Maybe a teenager. They're calling for help behind their father's back, Jake realized. Someone in that family knows they need us. But how do we help without causing a diplomatic incident? Karen asked. Jake thought about the problem. The Emperor had made it clear that accepting help would bring shame to his family. But his cubs were dying. There had to be a way to help them without destroying their honor. Lisa, can you locate where that signal came from? Working on it. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Got it. The signal came from the east wing of the palace. That matches the location our files show as the royal family quarters. Can we get in there without going through the throne room? Lisa studied the palace layout on her screen. Maybe. There are service entrances and maintenance tunnels. The palace is huge and very old. Some of those passages might not be well guarded. Jake made his decision. Ben, Karen, and Lisa, you're with me. We're going down there. Sir, Karen said carefully, if the Emperor finds out we snuck into his palace, it could cause serious problems. If we don't try, those cubs are going to die, Jake replied. I'd rather explain our actions to headquarters than explain why we let children starve when we could have helped. An hour later, they were back on the planet's surface. This time they approached the palace from the east side, where the service areas were located. The building was even more impressive up close. The crystal wall seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Lisa found a maintenance entrance that her scanner showed was unlocked. These passages were built for servants and repair workers, she whispered, as they moved through narrow corridors. They connect to all parts of the palace. The tunnels were dark and dusty. It was clear that no one had used them in months. Their flashlights cast strange shadows on the walls as they moved deeper into the building. This way, Lisa said, checking her scanner. The royal quarters should be just ahead. They climbed a service ladder and emerged through a hidden panel into a beautiful hallway. The walls here were covered with soft fabric and the floor was thick carpet. This was clearly where the royal family lived. Life signs are coming from that direction, Lisa pointed down the hall. They moved quietly, trying not to make any noise. The last thing they wanted was to wake up palace guards. But as they walked, Jake realized they hadn't seen any guards at all. The palace seemed to be almost empty. They found the first cub in a large bedroom decorated with toys and colorful pictures. She was lying on a bed that was too big for her small body. Even in the dim light, Jake could see how thin she was. Her golden fur had lost its shine, and her breathing was slow and shallow. Kirova, Ben whispered, reading the nameplate beside the door. This must be the youngest. Karen immediately went to work, pulling out her medical scanner. She's alive, but barely. Severe malnutrition. Her body is starting to shut down. In the next room, they found another cub, slightly older. He was awake and looked at them with frightened green eyes. When he saw the humans, he tried to growl, but he was too weak to make much sound. It's okay, Ben said softly. We're here to help. The cub, Prince Noxum, according to his nameplate, watched them carefully. He was scared, but Jake could see intelligence in his eyes. This was probably the one who had sent the distress signal. You came, Noxum whispered in broken human words. I thought no one heard. We heard, Jake said gently.
How long since you last ate?
Many days. Father says we must be strong, but Kirava can't even stand anymore. In the third room, they found Princess Yerath. She was older than the others, maybe the equivalent of a human teenager. When she saw the humans, she hissed and tried to attack, but she was too weak to get out of bed. Go away, she snarled. We don't need prey species help. Your sister is dying, Karen said bluntly. Do you want to save her, or do you want to keep your pride? Yerath stared at the human doctor for a long moment. Then she started to cry. It was a strange sound, more like a cat's yowl than human tears. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Father says accepting help is shameful. But I can hear Kirova getting weaker every day. What if she dies? The last room held Prince Zexel, the oldest of the cubs. He was conscious but very thin. When he saw the humans, he didn't try to attack or hide. He just looked at them with tired eyes. Are you here to help us? He asked simply. We want to, Jake said, but your father has forbidden it. Father is dying too, Zexel said quietly. He pretends to be strong, but I can see it. He's just as hungry as we are, maybe more because he gives us his food when he thinks we're not looking. Jake felt his heart break a little. The Emperor was starving himself to keep his cubs alive a little longer. No wonder he had looked so thin on his throne. Would you accept our help if we could give it without shaming your father? Jake asked. All 4 cubs looked at him with sudden hope in their eyes. You would do that? Sexal asked. We'll find a way, Jake promised. But we need to be smart about it. If your father discovers us here, he might send us away forever. What do you need us to do? Noxum asked. Jake looked at his team. They were all thinking the same thing. Somehow they had to feed these cubs without the Emperor knowing. They had to save the royal family while letting them keep their pride. It seemed impossible. But looking at the hope in those young alien faces, Jake knew they had to try. Back on the ship, Jake called an emergency meeting. The team sat around the table in the briefing room and the mood was serious. They all understood what they had seen in the palace. 4 young aliens were dying of starvation, and their father's pride was preventing him from accepting help. The situation is worse than we thought, Karen said, reading from her medical scanner. The youngest cub, Kirava, has maybe 2 days before her organs start failing. The others aren't much better. But if we just bring them food, the Emperor will refuse it, Lisa pointed out. He made that very clear. Ben leaned back in his chair, thinking. In my work with animals, I learned that sometimes the problem isn't the solution. It's how you present it. Maybe we need to find a way to help them that doesn't look like charity. What do you mean? Jake asked. Well, think about it from their perspective. They're proud warriors who have never needed help from anyone. Accepting food from humans would feel like admitting they're weak. But what if we could make it seem like something else? Tony Martinez, the ship's cook, had been quiet during most of the meeting. Now he spoke up. I've been thinking about this too. I looked up some files about Zephyrian food culture. They have very specific ideas about what foods are proper for royalty. Go on, Jake encouraged. Their biology is designed so they can only digest certain types of food. It's genetic. Their stomachs literally reject anything they consider inferior. It was built into them thousands of years ago to maintain their social order. Lisa frowned. So our food won't help them even if they wanted to eat it? Not exactly, Tony said. Their bodies check for certain chemical markers that tell them if food is worthy of their status. If those markers aren't there, they can't digest it properly. But if I could add the right chemicals to our rations, you could trick their biology into thinking our food is royal quality, Karen finished. Exactly. It would still be human food, but their bodies would accept it as if it came from their own world. Jake felt hope stirring in his chest. How long would it take you to modify our rations? Give me 6 hours in the lab and I can have something ready. But there's another problem. What? Even if their bodies can digest the food, their minds still know it's coming from humans. The mental rejection might be just as strong as the physical one. Ben sat up straighter. That's where animal psychology comes in. With scared or stubborn animals, you don't force them to do what you want. You make them think it was their idea. How do we do that with intelligent aliens? Lisa asked. The same way you do it with intelligent animals. You use their natural instincts. Ben stood up and walked to the wall screen, pulling up pictures of Zephyrians from the ship's database. Look at them. They're basically giant cats. They have the same hunting instincts, the same territorial behaviors, the same pack dynamics. If we can work with those instincts instead of against them, you think we can get them to accept food by appealing to their cat-like nature? Jake asked. I think we can get them to accept food by making them feel like they earned it rather than received it as charity. Tony nodded enthusiastically. I can prepare the food to appeal to their senses too. Zephyrians have much stronger smell and taste than humans. If I make the rations smell like prey animals, they would hunt naturally. They might think they caught it themselves, Karen said, understanding where this was going. Or at least that they earned it somehow, Ben agreed. The key is to never make them feel like they're taking handouts. Jake looked around the table at his team. They were smart people who cared about doing the right thing. If anyone could find a way to save the royal cubs while preserving their dignity, it would be them. Okay, he said. Tony, start working on modifying the rations. Ben, I want you to research Zephyrian behavioral patterns. Lisa and Karen, see what else you can learn about their biology and psychology. We're going to save those cubs. 6 hours later, they were back in the palace tunnels. This time they brought supplies. Tony had worked through the night to create what he called dignified rations. Human food that had been chemically modified to trigger all the right responses in Zephyrian biology and senses. It smells like Felthar hunting prey, he whispered as they moved through the corridors. At least according to the computer simulations, their noses should tell them this is food they're allowed to eat. They reached the royal quarters without being detected. The palace was still eerily quiet. Jake wondered if the Emperor was asleep, or if he was too weak to patrol his own home. In Kirava's room, the situation had gotten worse. The youngest cub was unconscious, her breathing so shallow that Karen had to check twice to make sure she was still alive. "We need to start with her," Karen said. "She's the closest to death." Ben unpacked the supplies they had brought. Along with Tony's modified rations, he had brought some tools from his veterinary kit. In my experience, sick animals respond better to food if they think they found it, rather than if someone gives it to them. He opened a container of the modified rations. The smell that came out was nothing like human food. It smelled wild and fresh, like something that had been hunted in an alien forest. Kirava's nose twitched even though she was unconscious. Her body was responding to the scent at an instinctive level. Ben placed small amounts of the food around her bed, making it look natural rather than arranged. Then he gently lifted the cub and placed her closer to the food. Her hunting instincts should wake up when she smells prey, he explained quietly. Even if she's too weak to hunt, her body will try to eat what's nearby. They waited. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Kirava's eyes opened. She looked confused and weak, but her nose was working. She could smell something that her brain told her was food. Proper food that she was allowed to eat. Slowly, weakly, she crawled toward the nearest portion of modified rations. She sniffed it carefully, her biological programming checking to make sure it was safe. Then finally, she took a small bite. Her body didn't reject it. The chemical markers that Tony had added convinced her digestive system that this was royal quality nutrition. For the first time in weeks, Kirava was able to eat. "It's working," Karen whispered, watching her scanner as the cub's vital signs began to improve. In the next room, Prince Noxum was awake and watching them work. He had seen his sister begin to eat, and hope was growing in his eyes. "Is that really food we can eat?" he asked quietly. "Why don't you try a small bite and see?" Ben suggested, placing some rations near the cub but not directly offering them. Noxum approached the food carefully. Like his sister, he sniffed it thoroughly before taking a tentative bite. His eyes widened in surprise. "It tastes like the hunting preserves on Velthar Prime," he said. "How is that possible?" "Your friend Tony is very good at his job," Jake said simply. Princess Yurath was more suspicious. She watched her younger siblings eat, but refused to try the food herself. "This is a trick," she said. "You're trying to make us dependent on you." "Look at your sister," Ben said gently. "Look how much stronger she is already." Yurath could see that Kirava was indeed looking better. The youngest cub was sitting up now, something she hadn't been able to do in days. But the teenage princess was still conflicted. "If Father finds out we accepted food from prey species—" "He doesn't have to know," Jake said. "As far as anyone knows, you caught this food yourselves. You would lie to protect us? We would do whatever it takes to keep you alive." Something in Jake's tone seemed to reach Yurath. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly approached the food. Like her siblings, she tested it carefully before eating. When she realized it was safe and satisfying, she began to eat more quickly. Prince Zexal, the oldest, understood the situation better than his siblings. "You're risking trouble with your own people to help us," he said to Jake. "Why?" Jake thought about how to answer. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because young people shouldn't die of starvation when help is available. Because maybe someday your people and mine can be friends instead of strangers." Zexal nodded slowly. "When I am emperor someday, I will remember what you did for us." Over the next few hours, all 4 cubs began to recover. The modified food was working exactly as Tony had hoped. Their bodies accepted it as proper nutrition, and their strength began to return. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. They had solved the immediate problem of feeding the cubs, but the emperor was still starving. And eventually he would notice that his children were getting healthier, while he was getting weaker. They needed a plan for the next phase of their mission. Saving the cubs was important, but saving the entire royal family would require even more creativity and care. 3 days had passed since the cubs first ate Tony's modified rations. The change in them was remarkable. Kirava, who had been near death, was now sitting up and playing with small toys. Her golden fur was beginning to shine again, and her green eyes were bright and alert. Prince Noxum had gained enough strength to walk around his room, and Princess Yurath was back to her normal teenage attitude, which meant she complained about everything but ate the food anyway. Prince Zexal was the most improved of all. He was now strong enough to help care for his younger siblings, but Jake knew they had a new problem. Emperor Kethavar would soon notice that his cubs were recovering while he continued to waste away. The proud ruler was still refusing all offers of help, and his condition was getting worse each day. We need to find a way to feed the Emperor without him knowing it's from us, Jake told his team during their morning meeting aboard the ship. That's going to be harder, Ben said. The cubs were willing to bend the rules to survive, but the Emperor is an adult with fully formed ideas about honor and shame. He's not going to be as easy to trick. Tony looked up from his cooking equipment. I've been thinking about this. What if we approach it differently? Instead of trying to sneak food to him, what if we give him a reason to eat our food that doesn't involve charity? What kind of reason? Lisa asked. Well, what if we challenged him to something? Zephyrians are warriors, right? They respect strength and courage. Maybe we could frame it as a contest or a test. Jake considered this. You mean like challenging him to try our food to see if it's worthy of his people? Exactly. Make it about proving human food isn't good enough for Zephyrians. If he's trying to prove we're inferior, he might be willing to taste our rations to demonstrate how bad they are. Karen nodded slowly, and once he tastes them, his body will accept the nutrition whether he wants to or not. It was a clever plan, but Jake worried about the risks. If the Emperor felt tricked or manipulated, it could ruin any chance of building trust between their peoples. There's another problem, Lisa pointed out. The cubs have been getting stronger, but they're still hiding it from their father. What happens when he notices? As if in answer to her question, Jake's communication device beeped. It was a message from Prince Zexel. Captain Morrison, the young alien's voice said quietly. We need your help. Father has noticed that we're stronger, and he's asking questions. We don't know what to tell him. Jake sighed. The moment they had all been dreading had arrived. We're coming down, he said into the communicator. An hour later, they were back in the palace tunnels. But this time, when they emerged into the royal quarters, they found Emperor Kethavar waiting for them. The ruler looked terrible. His golden fur was dull and patchy, and his green eyes were sunken in his skull. But despite his weakened condition, he still managed to look dignified and angry. So, he said in a voice that was barely a whisper, the prey species have been sneaking into my palace and poisoning my cubs. Father, no. Zexal stepped forward. They saved us. We were dying and they gave us food. Food that no true Zephyrian should be able to eat, the Emperor snarled. What magic have you used to corrupt their biology? Jake stepped forward carefully. The Emperor was weak, but he was still dangerous. Your Majesty, we only wanted to help. Your cubs were starving. Better dead with honor than alive with shame, Kethavar replied. Is it honorable to let your children die when help is available? Jake asked gently. The question hit the Emperor like a physical blow. He swayed on his feet, and for a moment Jake thought he might collapse. But somehow the proud ruler managed to stay upright. You think I don't know they were dying? Kethavar whispered. You think I wanted to watch them waste away? Every day I gave them what little food I had left. Every night I listened to them cry from hunger. Do you think that was easy for me? Jake could hear the pain in the alien's voice. This wasn't a cruel father. This was someone caught between love for his children and the weight of cultural expectations. Then why not accept our help? Karen asked. Because accepting charity from prey species would destroy everything our people believe about themselves, the Emperor said. If word spread that the royal family survived by begging from humans, it would shatter the foundations of our society. Ben stepped forward. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was something else? Kethavar looked at him suspiciously. What do you mean? Your cubs didn't beg for food. They earned it by being brave enough to try something new. They took a risk and they survived because of their courage. That's not the same thing, the Emperor said, but his voice was less certain now. Tony opened one of his containers, releasing the smell of modified rations into the air. The Emperor's nose twitched, and Jake could see hunger war with pride in his eyes. Your Majesty, Tony said respectfully, I've been working to create food that meets Zephyrian standards. Would you be willing to test it? To tell us if it's good enough for your people? It was a clever approach. Instead of offering charity, they were asking for the Emperor's expert opinion. It gave him a way to try the food without losing face. Kethavar looked at the container for a long moment. Jake could see him struggling with the decision. Finally, pride won out. I will not eat prey food, he said firmly, and I will not allow my cubs to continue eating it either. Father, please. Princess Yerath stepped forward. Look at Kirava. She can walk again. She can play. Don't you want us to live? The Emperor looked at his youngest daughter, and Jake saw his resolve waver. Kirava was indeed a picture of health compared to how she had looked a few days ago. Her recovery was obvious and dramatic. The food is safe, Prince Noxum added. It tastes like real prey, and our bodies accept it. There's no shame in eating something that our own biology approves of. You're still too young to understand honor. Kethavar said sadly. Maybe honor needs to change sometimes, Zexal said quietly. Maybe honor means doing whatever it takes to protect the people you love. The Emperor stared at his oldest son for a long moment. In those words, Jake heard an adult wisdom that surprised him. Despite his youth, Zexal understood the situation better than anyone. If I eat this food, Kethavar said slowly, if I accept help from humans, what becomes of our dignity? What becomes of our strength? Maybe it becomes something new, Jake said. Maybe it becomes the strength to accept help when you need it, and the dignity to offer help when others need it. The Emperor was quiet for several minutes. Jake could see him thinking, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. Show me this food, he said. Tony carefully prepared a small portion of the modified rations. He presented it to the Emperor with all the respect due to a planetary ruler. Kethavar sniffed it carefully, his biological programming checking its worthiness. It smells like noble prey, he admitted. How is this possible? We studied your food culture, Tony explained. We learned what your people consider worthy nutrition, and we tried to create something that would meet those standards. The Emperor took a tiny bite. His eyes widened in surprise. This is acceptable to my biology. My body recognizes it as proper food. Because it is proper food, Jake said. We just prepared it in a way that your culture would approve of. Kethavar took another small bite, then another. Jake could see the Emperor's body responding to the nutrition. Color was already returning to his pale cheeks. If my people knew I ate human food, they don't have to know, Zexal said. As far as anyone needs to know, we found new sources of food that meet our standards. The Emperor looked at his son with something like pride. You would lie to protect me? We would do whatever it takes to keep our family alive, Zexal replied, echoing Jake's earlier words. For the first time since they had met him, Emperor Kethavar smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was genuine. Perhaps, he said quietly, there is more honor in survival than I thought. 2 weeks had passed since Emperor Kethavar first tasted the modified rations. The change in the royal family was remarkable. The Emperor had regained much of his strength and dignity, though he was still thin. The cubs were thriving. Kirava was back to her playful self, running through the palace halls and laughing. Jake stood in the throne room, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The crystal walls had been cleaned and polished until they gleamed. Lights were on throughout the palace, powered by emergency generators that the Emperor had finally activated. Most importantly, there was hope in the air instead of despair. Captain Morrison, Emperor Kethavar said, rising from his throne. He moved with much of his old grace, though Jake could see he was still recovering. I have been thinking about our situation. Yes, Your Majesty? You saved my family when I was too proud to save them myself. You found a way to help us that preserved our honor while keeping us alive. This is not a small thing, Jake nodded respectfully. We were glad to help. But now I face a larger problem, the Emperor continued. My people are scattered across the galaxy. Many are starving on worlds that the Devourers destroyed. Others are trying to rebuild on planets that can no longer support them. The Zephyrian Empire is dying, not just here in this palace, but everywhere. What are you thinking? Ben asked. The Emperor walked to the large window that overlooked his capital city. I am thinking that pride is a luxury my people can no longer afford. I am thinking that survival requires new kinds of strength. He turned back to face the humans. I want to propose an alliance between your people and mine. The words hung in the air for a moment. Jake felt his heart race. An alliance with the Zephyrians would change everything for humanity. These were some of the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and they controlled strategic territories that other species feared to enter. What kind of alliance? Jake asked carefully. A partnership, the Emperor said. Your people have something mine need. The ability to create food that our bodies can accept and the wisdom to solve problems in ways we never considered. My people have things yours could use. Knowledge of galactic politics, military technology, and strategic positions throughout this sector. Lisa stepped forward. You're talking about sharing resources and knowledge. I am talking about survival, Kethavar replied. Alone, both our peoples face uncertain futures. Together, we could build something stronger than either could achieve separately. Prince Zexal entered the throne room, followed by his siblings. The young aliens looked healthy and happy, a dramatic change from the dying cubs they had been just 2 weeks ago. Father has been working on this idea for days, Zexal said to the humans. He wants to create joint colonies where Zephyrians and humans can live and work together. Joint colonies? Karen asked. Shared worlds, the Emperor explained. Places where your people's skills in agriculture and food science could help feed my scattered population, while my people's knowledge of defense and territorial control could protect human settlements from hostile species. Princess Yirath bounded forward with the energy of a healthy teenager. Tony has been teaching me about human cooking methods, she said excitedly. Did you know that food preparation can be an art form? We never thought of it that way before. Tony grinned. She's a natural chef. Give her a few more lessons and she'll be better than me. Prince Noxum was carrying a small device that he showed to Lisa. I've been learning about your scanning technology. It's completely different from ours, but it works better for some things. Maybe we could combine our methods. Even little Kirava had something to contribute. She ran up to Ben and hugged his leg. Ben taught me how to take care of sick animals, she said proudly. I want to be a doctor like Karen when I grow up. Jake looked around the room at this strange mixing of species and cultures. A few weeks ago, these aliens had been dying of starvation and pride. Now they were talking about building a shared future. Your Majesty, Jake said slowly, this is a much bigger decision than I can make alone. I would need to contact my superiors and get approval from Earth Colonial Command. I understand, the Emperor nodded, but I hope you will recommend this alliance to your leaders. I believe our peoples could do great things together. There would be challenges, Karen pointed out. Cultural differences, language barriers, different ways of thinking about problems. All true, Kethvar agreed. But my cubs have shown me that these differences can be strengths rather than weaknesses. Zexal has learned to think about problems the way humans do, considering options that traditional Zephyrian thinking would reject. Yirath has discovered that there can be honor in activities we previously considered beneath our notice. Noxum has found that combining technologies can create solutions neither species could achieve alone. And Kirava has learned that accepting help doesn't make you weak, Ben added. Smiling at the youngest cub, the Emperor's expression grew serious. Most importantly, I have learned that sometimes the greatest honor comes from admitting you need help, and the greatest strength comes from helping others who need you. Over the next several hours, they discussed the details of the proposed alliance. The Emperor had clearly thought through many of the practical issues. He suggested starting with a few test colonies where volunteers from both species could learn to work together. If those succeeded, the program could expand. We have agricultural worlds that are still fertile, he explained, and your people have the skills to maximize their productivity. We have military technology that could protect human settlements from raiders and hostile aliens. Together we could create something neither species could build alone. As the day wore on, Jake found himself increasingly excited about the possibilities. The Zephyrians had knowledge and resources that could help humanity expand safely into dangerous parts of the galaxy, and clearly, humans had skills that could help the proud alien species survive their current crisis. But more than that, he could see the personal bonds that were forming between the two groups. Tony and Yirath had become an unlikely cooking team. Ben and Noxum were already planning joint research projects. Karen was teaching Kirava basic medical skills while the young cub was teaching Karen about Zephyrian biology. There's one more thing, Emperor Kethvar said as the meeting wound down. A personal matter. He walked over to where Kirava was playing with some medical equipment Karen had given her. The smallest cub looked up at her father with bright, healthy eyes. Kirava, the Emperor said gently, do you remember when you were very sick? The cub nodded solemnly. I was scared. I thought I might die. And who helped you get better? Kirava looked around the room at the humans, then back at her father. My human friends. They brought me food and medicine. That's right, Kethvar said. And in our culture, when someone saves your life, they become part of your family forever. He stood and faced Jake directly. Captain Morrison, by our oldest laws and traditions, you and your team are now considered part of the royal bloodline. You are family to us, with all the rights and responsibilities that brings. Jake felt overwhelmed by the honor. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say you'll recommend our alliance to your people, the Emperor replied. Say you'll help us build a future where human cubs and Zephyrian cubs can grow up together, learning from each other. Jake looked around the room one more time. At Ben, who was showing Nox some pictures of Earth animals. At Tony and Urath planning their next cooking experiment. At Karen and Kirava, discussing the differences between human and Zephyrian medicine. At Lisa, who was already taking notes about potential colony locations. I'll do more than recommended, Jake said. I'll volunteer to help set up the first joint colony myself. Emperor Kethavar smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed his entire face. Then let us begin building tomorrow together. As Jake prepared to return to his ship to send his report to Earth, he reflected on how much had changed in just 2 weeks. They had come here to investigate a distress signal. They were leaving with the framework for an alliance that could reshape the galaxy. But most importantly, they were leaving knowing that 4 young aliens were alive and healthy, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest or pride, but from the simple act of sharing food with someone who is hungry. The starving royal cubs had eaten nothing until humans offered rations. Now they would feast at tables built by 2 species who had learned that the universe was a friendlier place when no one had to face it alone.